Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, the Atlanta Falcons made a trade.
Woohoo! And it's round 2 for the Hawks. But is it going to be one guy who makes them or one guy who breaks them?
And marriage proposals at sporting games, is it time to put these things to a stop? We'll talk about all that next and for the culture, but we got to do it. ATL Day Ones, it's time. Let's go.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I want to start by saying thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast and wherever you download your podcast. Make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that from you in advance. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. But T, when you think about Terry Fontenot, my dog, like I think he's moved into this realm right now, T. The man has made a trade for cornerback Jeff Okudah. He was a first-round pick the same year as A.J. Terrell. We remember all the conversations about where they ranked and whether Raheem Morris, who does he like more as far as who that in that corner in that particular draft. Has come to find out, hey, A.J. Terrell is that guy. He was that guy in that draft, and I think that Jeffrey Okudah has had a lot of injuries. But the Falcons say, hey, you know what? We'll give you a fresh start down here. They are reportedly trading a 5th-round pick as compensation. T, when you think about putting pieces together, trying to build something, I think Terry Fontenot might be on the right track with this one.
Yeah, and one of the things there are a couple things that make it the right track. One of the biggest things that makes it the right track, you gave up a 5th-rounder. Essentially, Terry Fontenot gave up nothing. So right. The Falcons, to me, are winning in that regard. That's part one. Part two is, like you said, I go back to those a couple of years ago as well in that particular draft. And Jeff Okudah was really the name that you kept hearing across the entire draft. And there were some thoughts that he would come to the Falcons. Obviously, A.J. Terrell, they selected him. And like you said, B, still believe it was the right move. And yes, Okudah has had injuries. However, when you look at the 2022 season, he started to look like the old Jeff Okudah again, especially in the beginning of the season. He did start 15 games for them. He set career highs in tackles and passes defended. And you and I both know that what this defense is looking for, what Ryan Nielsen is looking for, and what A.J. Terrell has shown is the desire to get in the game and not just be this corner who's saying, hey, I'm going to be a ball hawk. I'm going to look to just intercept the ball. I'm also going to look to defend passes and deflect passes and make sure that a pass is not completed or that the chains aren't moved. But also, if by chance you somehow, whether you're a running back or wide receiver, whomever, you get to that second level, Terrell is waiting for you because he doesn't mind tackling. So I believe in Jeff Okudah, you get that kind of guy who does not mind tackling as well. And Jarvis, I was looking at it from the perspective of the draft, and maybe that takes a little bit of pressure off of what you can, should, or will do at the number 8 position, because I think you got a guy. You got a guy.
Yes.
And I know that we still don't know where Casey Hayward is going to land, just as an example in terms of that injury piece. But again, I believe Terry Fontenot is stacking the deck. We're hopefully stacking the deck in the secondary and in other places so he can get somebody who can put the quarterback on the ground.
Yeah, that's why I love this move, right? Because it's kind of like, all right, let's give you a low round pick. And I know a lot of people talking about the compensation. Like, why would they trade him for a 5th-round pick? And like, he's a guy that's going into, his last year of his contract. And when you think about that, hey, like this is kind of almost like a prove it deal for him. And I think that when you have, you like you said, I love the term that you use, stacking the deck. That's because that's what this is that type of move, right? Because if he plays well for you, he's not going to command the type of money that A.J. Terrell is going to get, and he can get even another prove it deal. And because at the end of the day, the Falcons are showing that, hey, we feel like you can work down here. We have confidence in you. And Detroit is in a situation where, like, hey, man, this didn't work out. You were the number 3 overall pick in that year, in that draft, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. So, hey, let's move on. Let's part ways. And the Falcons are stepping in saying, hey, you know what? We feel like we can work with you. Ryan Nielsen saying, hey, I can work work with this kid. Give me this guy. He has that type of body type that I'm looking for at the cornerback position. And I think that the Falcons are stacking the deck and setting themselves up to follow the hashtag Tenitra mantra. Because I think that this is setting up very nicely, T, for the Falcons to go edge at that number 8 overall pick. Because when you talk about, the Casey Hayward piece, because we know that he has some starting capabilities, but they don't know whether or not I feel that they don't know whether or not they're going to be able to bring him into the fold as that number 2 starter, to start off. Because like you said, you don't know how long that lingering injuries. He's older. He might even come to a point where he say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and sit down. I'm good with football. But being that the situation which you're in today, they saw opportunity, and I love the fact that this regime is taking advantage of the situations that they're being dealt. And I think that they're going to do that too on April 27th, when that number 8 overall sounder comes on and Roger Goodell walks to that board. I'm very confident that it might be a guy, like you said, to put that quarterback on his back.
Indeed. And boy, you want to talk about putting somebody on their back after what? 3 games of going down. Sean Murphy put the whole Reds team on their back.
Yes, T. Yes. And here's the thing that I really love about Sean Murphy doing this thing last night against the Cincinnati Reds, excuse me. Like, people were like, oh, yeah, Sean Murphy, he's out here struggling. He's doing this, he's doing that. I'm just like, whoa. Like, it takes time. This is baseball. This is 162 doggone games. Like, why are y'all tripping 9-10 games in? Like, what are we talking about here? Right. But, yeah, like, for him to be able to come through in the clutch like he did last night, and, of course, Bryce Elder, got to give him his props as well for him being on the mound and the Braves dealing with so many injuries in the starting rotation, seemingly, and for him to come in and have the type of performance that he did, Sean Murphy, those two, I think, were the stars for me last night for the Atlanta Braves to get the win against the Cincinnati Reds.
And going back to Sean Murphy, he didn't just get a walk-off, right? It wasn't a walk-off, single, double, triple. It was
He went yard.
Home run
Yes.
in the 10th inning, right?
Yes.
And totally wiped away the fact that, like you said, Braves had a 3-1 lead and really a 1-0 lead going in courtesy of Bryce Elder. But I think it's important to note as well that you made a statement that I just want to co-sign on, and that is we do have to be patient. This is one of those leagues where you do have a ridiculous number of games, 162 games to be exact.
Yes.
And let's not forget, it took Matt Olson a long time to really, really get his sea legs under him as a Brave. Now, when he got his legs under him, it was lights out for the rest of last season. And as we've seen, the beginning of this season, he started out pretty solid as well. So I just think that overall fans have to be patient. And listen, if we are talking about Jarvis, 11 games. This is where he jumps up and shows himself to be worthy at the plate in 11 games. I think 2 things. Number 1, we're good to go because we're only 11 games in. And number 2, it does give you just a little bit more peace of mind after you know what we saw in Travis d'Arnaud going down with a concussion and how valuable he'd been at the plate. So definitely wanted to give Sean Murphy a shout out. But boy, Bryce Elder, it goes back to what we were talking about yesterday where it's like, hey, we don't have to hit the panic button, okay? Jared Schuster had a moment in his debut. Dylan Dodd in his second game, a little shakier than his stellar first game. But Bryce Elder goes back to reminding you when he can take you through 6 of the third innings, and he can take you through those innings, essentially giving up 6 hits. But more importantly, he struck out 7 and he only walked 1. So remember, this was a team that at the beginning of last year and even the last season, they were having trouble with those walks with their pitchers. Not anymore. So I think he goes back to, in case you were somebody who was already waffling, gets you confident again in a young pitching rotation.
Yeah, and I think that when you think about being able to come through like that, this is why this roster was constructed the way it is. You know what I mean? And I think that, those are some of the things that we have to continue to play with and play through. As far as as far as the Braves concerned, I'm talking about I'm speaking French and stuff. Look at me. but I think that they are built to handle the things that they're going through right now, and I think that when you look at what the deal is for tonight because they're bouncing back. Hey, Kyle Wright is coming. And when you think about Bryce Elder, being the guy solidifying himself now, let's see if Kyle Wright can, coming off the quarter zone shot with the shoulder inflammation, everything, dealing with that during the spring training. Now he's going to make his start tonight against the Cincinnati Reds. I'm all up for that, and I'm expecting him. I have expectations for this team. So I'm expecting Kyle Wright to do the same, and we definitely will keep an eye on that as they get started tonight. But speaking of tonight, what's going down with the Atlanta Hawks versus the Miami Heat, right? In the play-in game, they're meeting up against the boogeyman. But we're going to talk about coming up next. The ownership has given the front office permission to trade Trae. Woo! We'll talk about all that next. But first, we got to talk about FanDuel.com/LockedOn because it is the #1 sportsbook in America. And if you are rocking with us, the #1 podcast in America, so you should do the same when it comes to the FanDuel Sportsbook because they got everything right there just for you. And guess what? They have a special deal going on for the people who are new customers. They're offering up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So, yeah, man, you out here messing up the money, messing up the church's money, go and check out FanDuel because they might got a little something for you, up to $1,000 if your first bet doesn't win. So go and check those guys out. They got the money line and everything to threes drained. So you can get all those things. You can combine all your bets for a chance at a same game parlay. So here's what I want you to do. I want you guys to go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get your no sweat first bet. That's up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And you want to talk about some threes being drained. We hope to see the Hawks trending up because, of course, the last time they played the Miami Heat, they had, we'll call it a respectable 31%, but they've actually improved quite a bit since about a month or so ago. But speaking of the Hawks and what we want to see out of them, I mentioned in the tease that you got a 2.0 here between the Hawks and the Heat. Now, last year, it was round 1 of the playoffs. This year, it's the first game of the play-in round. Does it hinge on Trae Young? Is he the guy who, if he goes, so goes the Hawks? Or is he the guy where it's like, maybe not as much? Recent article that came out just yesterday, Jarvis, talked about the Hawks changing everything. And we know what those changes were, right? We know
Absolutely.
the offseason shakeups. Out goes Travis Schlenk, for example. In comes Landry Fields. And the list goes on and on. Out goes Nate McMillan. In comes Quin Snyder.
Yes.
But the question has remained from the lineup perspective, Jarvis, who's going to go in and out. And we kind of know that the reason Quin Snyder was brought in with about 22 games left in the regular season was so that he could evaluate those players and kind of determine it. But before this season, and really, Jarvis, I'll venture to say that before the back half of this season, speculating that Trae Young would be gone or that the Hawks would move on for him was like blasphemy.
Absolutely. Yes.
But after 2 years of underperforming and being 2 years removed from their trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, now that's starting to be a question that's being posed again. And so Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, who was the most recent writer to propose that, if you will, to say that, hey, Tony Ressler and company, regardless of if Trae desires to stay or not, that decision could be made on and hinged on what they do in this play-in round or really in this postseason overall. Your thoughts?
Wow, that's a lot. Because when I used to get sad or upset when I hear about, because my guy for Yahoo Sports, the brother Chris. Oh,
Chris Haynes?
Chris Haynes, yeah. Chris Haynes had reported that, Trae may request a trade, depending on how things go in the playoffs and the postseason. Sure. I was like, man, you gotta stop all that stuff, man, because we cover this team very closely, so we know we talk to different people within the organization and kind of understand and have a really good feel of what's going on with this team. But now I'm in a space where I don't mind the report of them saying, of the ownership saying, hey, if you guys want to trade him or you feel like there's something comparable or that makes sense that would get this team to where we want to be, go by all means, go ahead. You have the green light to go ahead and do that. And I don't have a problem with that, even if it's not a space where they want to trade him or they won't trade him. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to be everything is on the table when it comes to getting this team better and making them a contender. And I don't think nothing at this point, at this juncture, nothing needs to be left off to the table when it comes to trying to get this team better. And I think that's something that Trae needs to understand. And that's something that I had to come to understand as well because, I really like Trae. I love what Trae has done, coming in and having all the pressure with the whole Luka Doncic thing. And then how about this too, T? Yeah. It's a little sidebar. How about the possibility of both of these guys being traded? Because Luka being traded, you know what I mean? Like, who would have thought that on draft night when this trade went down? So I think that all these things kind of come into play when it comes to Trae Young, whether he stays or goes. And I don't necessarily believe that it might be hinged on what he does tonight in this particular game. But I do believe that, the main piece right here, which is a very important one, Quin Snyder, they said that he's going to have a lot of say-so as far as how the roster is constructed. And I think that's the biggest part that was in this article. We're talking about, whether or not they're going to trade him because we know I really trust Quin Snyder from a basketball standpoint.
It was the first thing that I thought of when they hired him. And listen, this is no offense to the Hawks organization whatsoever. We kind of work for them, so I'm not about to offend them. But I will still tell the truth and try to be as objective as possible. And the first thing I thought when Quin Snyder decided to come here was, wow, legitimately, what makes this a destination versus all of the other cities and teams and franchises that were after him? Well, it makes sense that you would make him pretty much head coach basketball plus. And the plus is that he would have a real decision, like some semblance of authority and really a voice in the room when it comes to where this team is going to go as it relates to personnel decisions. Listen, this is a guy who had players like Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, just to name a few. I mean, we could go down the whole list of his 8 seasons with the Jazz, and he continued to climb the ladder as far as
consistency was the key for him.
Exactly. Yeah. And as far as improvement in stats, we talked about it yesterday, how now the Hawks go from middle of the road to like number 2 in offensive rebounding and number 1 in second chance points since he arrived here. So he makes an instant impact, but there's one area, because of course that's on the defensive side of the ball. Now on the offensive side of the ball, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be one game necessarily. Like if for some reason Trae doesn't play well against the Heat, meaning they trap him again and he can't figure it out, right? Even though he's got DeJounte Murray to help him this time. Yeah. Or if for some reason they don't get out of the play-in round, now that's where I think it could make a difference. Because if you don't get out of the play-in round because you're not moving the ball the way that Quin Snyder would like you to move the ball, that's going to be a challenge. Because think about it, Jarvis.
Let me add this to the T. Let me add this too. Or if he's not moving off the ball like he's supposed to, because we know that's a big thing as far as when it comes to Trae Young, as far as to whether or not he wants to, because, Quin runs a motion style offense. So this guy's moving with the ball in your hands or moving while the ball's not in your hands. We know that has been a real stickler for Trae, not outwardly, but we just looking at it on the court. He doesn't tend to want to do it consistently. And I think that's what Quin Snyder wants when it comes to implementing his offense. So I think that's going to be a big key as well.
Well, that was the point that I was making, in going back to the fact that everyone always looked at Nate McMillan and said, hey, the Hawks get caught in this half-court offense and they can't really move the ball and they stay stagnant. One of the reasons you stay stagnant is kind of because your point is dribbling the clock out. And unfortunately, sometimes when he didn't dribble the clock out, there were some ill-advised shots. So if this offense stagnates because you're continuing to dribble out the clock and you're the reason that they sort of stay in a half-court offense, then that's going to be something where you can't help but look at you because you're the field general. So you've got to be responsible for moving that ball. So while I don't think it hinges on one game, I will say that it kind of hinges on what he does in this postseason, because it's probably going to be a microcosm of what we've seen this entire season. And that's the reason I think that it could very well hinge on what goes on here. And I think it's been a shift, because what our guy Chris Haynes was reporting was more on the side of Trae requesting a trade. I think what Kevin O'Connor Tanner and others have spoken about more recently is the organization making a trade and deciding they
might not want you.
That's where I think we are now. That's exactly where I think we are now. But John Collins, on the other hand, might have something else to say about that because in a conversation that he had with our guy, Brandon Scoop,
friend of the show,
he of Valley Sports, John Collins made some very interesting comments. And I thought, maybe that's something that we want to chime in on because, listen, that's his guy, right? And I can't blame him for trying to defend his guy or trying to, give some positives as it relates to his thoughts on Trae Young and the constant comparison, right, to Steph Curry. So John Collins says, quote, I can definitely say for sure that he's a way better playmaker than Steph, and he's a better isolation scorer. But obviously there's different things that he does better and Steph does better. For me, Jarvis, we can stop right there because you can dig into that one statement alone and break that down and give your thoughts. So let's kind of break that down. First of all, he says, I can definitely say for sure that he's a way better playmaker than Steph, and he's a better isolation scorer. Okay, stop. Playmaker. Go ahead and weigh in on that because I guess my question would be definition of a playmaker.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be comparing these. It's not a comparison. Like it shouldn't even be. We have not reached the point where Trae Young can be compared to Steph Curry. I understand the whole logo threes and all that stuff. Yeah, that's cool and all, but when you're talking about comparison of games, like I think people don't really understand. Like Steph Curry is probably one of the best shooters of all time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's in the conversation now. And when you think about him adjusting his game to the NBA, him being a small guard, and teams trying to take advantage of him on the defensive side of the basketball, I don't think Steph Curry gets enough credit for, doing the necessary things in order for them to get to this championship level and be considered a dynasty. I think that all of those, from a leadership standpoint, and being willing to motion and move without the basketball in his hands, that's what took his game to a next level. Coming off screens, handoffs, all that stuff. So, all of that. That Trae is not willing to do any of that right now, like consistently. So that's why I don't really care for this comparison. Now, when you're talking about, handling the rock and getting dimes and all that stuff, I've seen a stat. They were saying I think he has like over 1,700 points and over 700 assists within the past couple years or so. No other player in the NBA has done that. Yeah, that's all cool. But, like, where has it gotten you, though? Like,
and that's right there, guys. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that's exactly where my mind was going. Because even if you look at the stats from this season, like, Trae has more field goals made. But you know what the differential is, Jarvis? Steph Curry has 559, so we'll just call it 560. Trae has 597, 600. If you only have a differential of 40 field goals made, and yet Steph Curry played under 2,000 minutes. Trae Young was closing in on 2,600 minutes. That tells you how unbelievably
efficient.
Yes, that Steph Curry can be when he is physically in a game. So when you start talking about playmaker, to me, that's a playmaker or someone who has 49% field goals. It goes to what you just said. 49%, you're efficient, especially when you're shooting 43% from three, when you're looking to Trae's 34, and then you get it done at the charity stripe as well. 91%. That's crazy, crazy, crazy. And I'm going to hit you with something too, Jarvis. You just hit it. We don't talk enough about, and I know I'm using the Encanto reference there, but we don't talk enough about Steph Curry and his rebounding, okay? Because like I said, 600 less minutes of game time, and yet 341 rebounds to 217 rebounds. So again, we don't knock John Collins for obviously uplifting his guy. That's what you are supposed to do.
Of course. You and
your guy are in
that's
limbo.
Pretty cool to see, right? Like, all right,
you and your guy are in limbo, so we don't really know what's going to happen with either one of you. So, hey, if you want to go ahead and be that guy who supports and lifts up, that's a good thing. But let's be careful, Jarvis. I think this is one where you do want to put the TBD by it and say to be determined. And hey, we don't have to just debate about it here. I am sure when the folks at Locked On Sports Today hear about this type of thing, or really anything as it relates to this NBA play-in and playoff season, you can check them out because they'll give reaction. And Jarvis, I'll be honest with you, I don't doubt that they might give some reaction to Jeff Okudah, because acquiring a corner of his stature may be something that those national guys want to talk about as well, coming here to potentially shore up the Falcons secondary. So don't forget, you go to YouTube, check out ATL Day Ones. Yes, you can see our faces and you can hear our voices, of course, wherever you download your podcast. And you can do the same thing for Locked On Sports Today, just like you do for FTC. Go ahead and check them out on what they call Take of the Day. That's Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Sports Today. Check that bad boy out. But here, this is for the culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, and the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's just how we get down today. And, you know, today is no different, T, because when you think about marriage proposals, right, at sporting events, you know, it's kind of cool, you know, heartwarming and everything like that. But I don't know if I think I might call BS on this one, because, you know, the young man got on the knee. He was at the Toronto Raptors versus the Boston Celtics in Boston, and he got down on the knee. Before he got down on the knee, he started pumping the crowd. I was like, yeah, everybody get up. Everybody stand up. And then he gets down on the knee. He proposes to the young lady. The young lady standing there looking, and then she's like, nah, and kind of sits down and then puts the sunglasses on. And I'm sitting up here like, oh, no. And like, oh, let's watch the rest of the game. Like, no, I don't. If it went down like that in real life, now I know this was a real event, it happened, but I question it, because I'm not about to get ready to sit down and continue to watch the game for you if you doggone just turn me down in front of all these folks.
Yeah, and there was a video that went viral many years ago, because it was this one proposal where, I mean, this guy at a Houston Rockets game just got his heart straight smashed. But like you said, after people kind of, you know how we do, we go back and we break the video down and we remix it, we slow-mo it, and then we go Google it to see, like, who are these people and what's the background story. So, you know, Twitter went in and concluded that it was a fake proposal. That it was a fake proposal. And so, yeah, I figure, I don't know. And maybe I should ask the entertainment team for the Hawks, because I'm a part of that entertainment team. And we actually just had a proposal of recent. I want to just ask them, like, give me some of the, you know, industry secrets. Like, we know they, of course, talk to these individuals in advance, but do you like already know that this person for sure is going to get a yes? Because, like, number one, that cheapens it if, you know, they get a no. And number two, like, this, it's entertainment, so it's still supposed to be hinged on something positive. So I don't know. Maybe I take that back, Jarvis. Maybe it's not so bad if there's a no, because maybe that could cause drama and be good for the entertainment team as well. But I'm with you. Might be fake.
Yeah, there's some fakeness going on. Like, oh, and that's what makes me upset sometimes, when people try to take something that's pretty cool, is really cool, to propose somebody at a sporting event. Like, that's cool. That's cool. But, you know, like, but to stage it and to in all the world just to go viral, like, how are you gonna benefit from that? Well, anyway,
well, folks out here looking for a real engagement. I'm sorry. Okay, Jarvis, sorry.
I felt a little touching this right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey man, you know, like, y'all buzz better come to correct. Y'all coming to tea. You know what I'm saying, with that engagement, because, you know, I'm addressing you down, Jack. You know, I got my girl back. You know what I mean? Like, here we go. But yeah, we want to say thank you guys for rocking with us today and putting up with our foolishness and make ATL Day One's your first listen of the day. Why don't you go ahead and check out Locked On Sports Today, and, you know, make sure you make yourself an everydayer. Every day, you need to be listening to Locked On Sports Today, ATL Day Ones, Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, checking out the Locked On Braves postcast, all this stuff. Make sure you be there. We really appreciate you. You'll never regret it, because we got all Atlanta sports covered right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And before we get out here, if you don't do anything else with your life today, why don't you make sure that you share love, show love, and most importantly, spread love.